Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life Podcast. I'm Kristen Hawkins, and just to confuse you today, I have a guest on, and her name is Kristen. She's spelled with an E, I'm an A, so there is a little bit different, but I'm really excited. Kristen Day, the Executive Director of Democrats for Life, is joining me today for this podcast because we are going to talk about where the political parties stand on abortion. Now, when we talk about abortion, I try to make sure I say this often. This is not, the issue of abortion is not a political issue, and I'm using air quotes here. This is a human rights issue. This is something that, regardless of where you stand on a whole host of issues, this should be common sense. In fact, every human being should be against the killing of other innocent human beings in the womb. But sadly, they're not, and many of them are Democrats. So we're going to talk about where the parties stand on abortion. And I also want to talk about why. Like, how did it get to be this way? Because it doesn't make sense, especially when you hear rhetoric a lot of times from candidates, especially Democratic candidates, will talk about standing with the most vulnerable and protecting Americans from harm. And then they turn around and then advocate for abortion. In fact, it's like very, very infuriating personally. So to get us started, Kristen, I'm going to start off with just saying some of the stuff about the Republican Party platform. It's certainly morphed over the years. I think, and Kristen, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. The Republicans were actually pro-choice. I think Richard Nixon was pro-choice, and he was racist as well, and there were some not great things that were said in some of the I think the tapes and the recordings that were later released. But the Republicans weren't a pro-life party, especially in the 60s and 70s. And it kind of changed. And we talk a little bit of that in the history of the pro-life movement episode, that, the parties sort of switched. You had this resurgence of like the Christian right, the Jerry Falwell moral majority in the late 70s and the 80s. And then you saw these evangelical Christians getting involved in the political process, which actually moved the Republican Party very right on abortion. And so it was kind of a change. Phyllis Schlafly, one of my mentors, she was a founder of Eagle Forum. She was like single-handedly responsible for stopping the ERA from being ratified, which is really the Everything Related to Abortion Act. Phyllis actually, after that, became very involved in the RNC, the platform of the party, and making sure the Republican platform became a pro-life platform, and started an organization, RNC for Life. The platforms, if you all don't know, they change every 4 years. So every 4 years, when there's a presidential election, the parties get together in the summer, their big convention, and there's a platform committee. And so the platforms will change. And so it's a fight. It literally still to this day in the Republican Party, it is a fight every 4 years to make sure the Republican Party stays pro-life. Because what happens is, if you're an abortion activist and you're a Republican, you're going to try to infiltrate and kind of get selected to be on the platform committee. So the Republican platform right now is very, very strong when it comes to abortion. The platform that was adopted in 2016 talked about a lot of the David Daleiden Center for Medical Progress undercover videos. So it called for a ban on the sale of aborted baby fetal parts. It talks a lot. In the past, they've talked about a passage for a human life amendment. The Republican Party has talked about how all life should be protected under the 14th Amendment. The Republican Party platform specifically in 2016 talked about not allowing and not passing legislation that would require taxpayers to fund abortion. So the party platform for the GOP is very strong when it comes to abortion right now. Not saying that it's always going to be strong, and that's why I'm kind of giving you this warning that it's a fight every single convention, every 4 years. Now, Kristen, tell me what the Democrat platform is and how did it get this way?
Yes, going back to what you were saying about, the parties were not, the Republican Party was not pro-life and the Democratic Party was not pro-choice back in the 60s and 70s. It really started to change within the Democratic Party in like the late 70s when, we passed the Hyde Amendment in the late 70s. But when we passed the Hyde Amendment, it was a very bipartisan cooperation to get that language into law. that says there will be no taxpayer funding of abortion. 125 Democrats voted for it, which is a huge number. So since that time, though, it gradually changed and became worse and worse. And we have been fighting that platform language and trying to get it to be more consistent with democratic values that say that you should stand up for the vulnerable. You should support those who need assistance. And we always say that who's more vulnerable than an unborn baby who really depends on the mother for all the nutrients. Even a baby who's a month old still depends on its mother. So to differentiate between location is just inconsistent with the democratic values that say that we want to protect those who need assistance. So in 1996, we did get some language into the platform that said that we recognize that Democrats hold differing views on issues of abortion and capital punishment. And we welcome those Democrats into the party. We see this diversity as a source of strength. And we were able to keep that language for a few rounds of the platform. But it just gradually has become worse and worse. Pretty much 2016, we hit rock bottom as far as having anything in the platform that would say that pro-life Democrats are welcome or pro-life Democrats are part of the party. It basically was all about abortion, taxpayer funding of abortion, no limits on abortion, just abortion, abortion, abortion. And it has allowed Democratic groups to impose litmus tests against pro-life Democrats and campaign against pro-life Democrats and basically want them out of the party.
Which is, to be honest with you, it's such a stupid tactic.
Yes.
We looked at some of the polling, and I know we're doing with Students for Life Action, working with Susan B. Anthony list, like getting ready for the 2020 election, which you and I might not agree on all the candidates we're voting for, but probably some because of the issue of abortion, because I'm a single issue abortion voter. But it's interesting because some of the targeting that we're doing and the persuadable voters we're going to be door knocking and phone banking, they're Democrats, because we know over a third of Democrats who say that they're registered Democrats have already identified themselves to be pro-life. And you think about these states where, these are like the swing states, the blue collar Rust Belt states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where you have a lot of union members, folks who are, proud union members, proud Democrats, who also are very religious, who understand that their child in the womb was a human being and shouldn't have been brutally dismembered simply because of their location or their size. So David Brooks had a really good article, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago in the New York Times. I talk about it all.
I loved it.
He said, he qualified with like, I'm a bona fide Democrat, I'm liberal, I'm totally for abortion. However, if we are going to be smart, maybe we should like moderate on this issue of abortion a little bit, because we need to win these voters in these Rust Belt states and we keep losing them.
Yes, I can tell you. So we are right now in the process of fighting the platform right now. And we sent a letter to every member of the platform committee saying that Democrats for Life wants the opportunity to testify and explain why this platform that we currently have is bad, and it will dissuade Democratic voters from coming out and voting for Democrats.
Yeah.
And so we sent that out last week. So we'll see what they say about hearing our voices. But I tell you, we sent the information out to our membership just on Monday, and the response has been just tremendous from our members. They're like, yes, let's fight this. We're so tired of the party being the party of abortion, and we want to take it back. So I'm encouraged by the number of Democrats who want to come out. We have actually one of our state chapters is considering doing a pro-life pause and encouraging Democrats to stay home and not vote for the presidential candidate because of if the platform does not come around and include us and represent us in the Big Ten of the Democratic Party. They don't want our vote. So it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting election year for sure.
I like that phrase too, a pro-life pause.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got goosebumps when you said that. I'm writing that down. Yeah, that would be significant, especially when you think about the Democratic candidate who's going to be running against Donald Trump isn't probably the strongest candidate. And so it's like, you got to get every single vote. You're going to need every single vote. Why would you want to? And it's frustrating too, because you think about Joe Biden, I'm trying to do this in a C3 friendly way. So if I have to struggle for my words, I'm trying to not violate, any IRS laws. But Joe Biden, when he was a U.S. Senator, and, even, because he was a U.S. Senator for years before he became a vice president, actually spoke about being pro-life, personally pro-life, Catholic. He would still kind of vote wrong. But then he always, he was for the Hyde Amendment, like President Obama was for the Hyde Amendment, saying that, yes, taxpayers shouldn't have to fund abortion. But then because of the party platform in 2016 now calls for elimination of Hyde, Biden came out and now he's like, former Vice President Biden is for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment. Now he's even stronger. It's actually very this is why people don't like politics, right? Because it's like, well, do you really believe that? Have you always believed that? Or are you just saying that because you need Planned Parenthood's money in the campaign?
That's the frustrating thing, because there are so many Democrats, elected officials, and I know of them, who are pro-life, and they don't vote that way. And it's just incredible to me that you, as a person, believe that life begins in the womb, it's worthy of protection, and you won't vote your conscience on that issue. And it's just terribly frustrating. I think Connor Lamb was one of the from Pennsylvania is one of the ones who he came out and said he's pro-life Democrat, was running as a pro-life Democrat, but then said he wouldn't vote that way quietly. So a lot of our members in Pennsylvania in his districts were quite frustrated because they voted for him because he was a pro-life Democrat, and then he turns around and says, "Well, I'm pro-life personally, but I'm not going to vote that way." And that just makes no sense.
The psychological hoops they're going through, because is a justification, Kristen, when you've had these very uncomfortable conversations. By the way, if you wanted to know a master, someone who can walk into a room and know everybody in the room doesn't want her there, that would be Kristen, because she does that with Republicans and Democrats, and it's always she is the uncomfortable person. If she's talking to the Republicans, she's a Democrat, and if she's talking with Democrats, she's pro-life. So you're brilliant at being able to just know that it's okay that people don't like you.
It's okay that people don't like me, right?
That's why I tell my kids all the time. They get upset, why, Mom, why do people say this about you? I'm like, it's okay, it's fine. I know what the truth is. It's the mental hoops that they're going through. Is it that, well, I know abortion's wrong, but if I'm not elected to Congress, or if I don't retain my seat, I do all this X, Y, Z for, these issues that I think I'm voting right on. Therefore, I'm doing the most amount of good there. So yeah, I might have to throw the babies under the bus a little bit, but but that allows me to do the maximum amount of good here.
Yeah. I think it's a lack of courage. It's a lack of courage. When you see somebody like Dan Lipinski, time and time again, go up and stand his ground and not waver, not change his position. That to me is courage. And it's somebody who believes in something. I think these people who change their positions and just kowtow to the abortion lobby are just cowards, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And I just hope that they will come around at some point. And I think we have another member, John DeBerry in Tennessee, who he's getting the Dan Lipinski treatment there in Tennessee, where the abortion lobby tried to defeat him 4 times and failed. And since they couldn't beat him at the ballot box, they removed him from the ballot. And late enough in the cycle where he couldn't run as an independent. So if he's going to run to retain his seat, he has to do a write-in campaign.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you think about, and I'm going to give some perspective. Dan Lipinski's U.S. congressman, served for several years. He, for the past several cycles, has had huge primary campaign. So, the primary is where a lot of the special interest groups will put their money, and that's where, you kind of figure out who's going to run, the Republican versus the Democrat. And this year, you guys were involved. We were actually involved in Students Life Action. We sent a team of students the last weekend, right before COVID. I think we might have been breaking some law because that was the last group of students we had out, going door to door right when the quarantine started. But he lost. He lost because of the primary. The party, the Planned Parenthood, NARAL spent millions of dollars to primary him to get a more acceptable Democrat put on the ballot who is 100% pro-abortion and who has maybe a fifth of the experience and knowledge that Dan Lipinski.
I would say less than that.
Maybe less than that. Yeah, I was trying to be generous. But yeah, I mean, it's such a heartbreaking story, and I know right now there's a primary going on in New Mexico with some pro-life Democrats who stopped this extremist legislation that was going to be passed, and it was because of pro-life Democrats, courageous pro-life Democrats, to stop it. So that's something we're trying to do with our Students for Life Action, the 501c4 sister organization of Students for Life, is get involved in some of these primaries and support support pro-life Democrats and actually go after pro-choice Republicans. And because the primary is a good way to kind of get your better people out there for the general campaign, but we have to be supporting these pro-life Democrats, because I believe, we'll really know we've won when the Republicans and the Democrats are competing for our votes. Because,
yes.
And as full disclosure, I'm a Republican. I can contest multiple times how, we have been used for our votes of, hey, I'm going to speak the pro-life language in the election, say I'm pro-life, and then when I get to the U.S. Senate, oh, well, you know what? That's not really good timing right now. The midterms are coming up, so we have to wait. That is why, to be honest with you, Planned Parenthood wasn't, why we never could a vote in the U.S. Senate on defunding Planned Parenthood. And also because there were two pro-choice Republicans that even in, at the beginning of President Trump's term, you had a pro-life House that was led by Republicans until they lost the majority to Democrats in midterm. But you had a Senate that was Republican. So a lot of people ask, like, what's wrong with the U.S. Senate? Why couldn't they do it? They should have gotten the job done. Well, yeah, Republicans technically had the majority, but not pro-lifers. There were two pro-choice Republicans who were holding everything up, and there were trades and back deals and.
Yeah, it's tricky in the Senate. Like, it's very complicated. So the House, you just need a simple majority to get to defund, but in the Senate, you have to get to that 60 vote threshold, and so we need to get 60 pro-lifers in the Senate to actually make that happen.
And my home state of West Virginia, the senator there, Senator Manchin, he was a pro-life governor. He was a pro-life Secretary of State. He had always been Democrat, campaigned as a pro-life senator, and still to this day in West Virginia campaigns as a pro-life senator. But then when it came to any of the defunding stuff, he kind of betrayed.
It's tough.
How did he vote on Gorsuch and Kavanaugh? I think he voted right.
Yes. He did, but I think, if we can get more pro-life Democrats to the Senate, we'll get more pro-life Democrats to defund. It's hard to be the one that is just
by yourself.
If you take this vote to defunding, even if he wants to, you're setting yourself out there for I think the Dan Lipinski treatment.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of good on a lot of issues, and Joe Manchin has been very helpful to Democrats for Life and other areas. So I think
you're very generous. I wouldn't be that generous, but that's the difference.
But again, there's only one Planned Parenthood clinic in all of West Virginia.
There is. So there absolutely is. I remember last time I met with him with David Delight, and he was like, well, there's no abortion facilities. I was like, actually, yeah, there's one in Charleston. It's not Planned Parenthood, but there is one. And so I was like bringing it up on my phone. I was like, it's right here, like right where the state capitol was, right where you used to work. But there's so much education that has to be done. And what you're saying of, they don't want to be the one standing alone, because they're going to get the Dan Lipinski treatment. I think it was the State of the Union that President Trump gave. I think it was maybe his first one. And there was a GIF that was made out of Senator Manchin, because President Trump said something about coal energy. Okay. And the Democrats were all sitting there stoically, with their hands crossed. And Joe Manchin stands up and starts clapping, because, it's West Virginia with the Republicans. And the look on Chuck Schumer's face. And he tries to get up, and he looks at Chuck Schumer, who, is the Senate Minority Leader, is the big boss, and he sits back down. And it was like, oh, Joe, you should have just done it anyway, because it was, in hindsight, it made you look very, very weak. But I think that shows you the power that the party has, and if you don't kind of play their game, you're not going to get the, Dan Lipinski talked about. He and I talked about this before, of like being hauled into Nancy Pelosi's office and like being stripped of committee assignments, because the party leadership determines what committees you're on. And if you're in like a agricultural state, you want to be on the agricultural committee, but then they can say, no, never mind, we're not going to put you on that committee. And that's how you're going to kind of get your constituents to continue voting for you, if you send back pork and do things that help, that constituency in your state.
Because Marcy Kaptur from Ohio, she used to vote more pro-life more frequently. She voted for the Stupak Amendment in 2010, but I haven't seen her do any pro-life votes since then. But she was not given the appropriations chair because she voted pro-life. So yeah, there's definitely a penalty.
And that's like a very, very, very powerful position in Washington, D.C. So the Appropriations Committee is like the money committee. So the chair of the committee makes decisions about what gets on the agenda, what gets voted on. Like that's a big get to be able to be the Appropriations chair. And even to be on the Appropriations Committee in general is a big get. So what do we do? I guess the question is, the Republican Party has been very good on life. I think the action item is if you're a Republican, you have to continue to advocate for the Republican Party to like do what they say they're going to do. We've got to continue to make sure the Republican Party keeps a strong pro-life platform. But what are the action items if you're a Democrat, or maybe if you're not affiliated, but you want to help the Democrats become more pro-life? What are the things that we can do? Right now is the Democratic platform. That is our most important thing right now, is to make your voice heard on the Democratic platform. It's the most important time in history right now for our party, because if we don't moderate it this time around, more people are going to leave the party. It's good for Republicans, but for Democrats. So, I mean, if you can, contact the DNC, contact your local Democratic Party, say the platform needs to reflect the values of a majority of Americans and a majority of Democrats who, a majority of Democrats oppose abortion after 20 weeks. So a majority of Democrats oppose abortion after 12 weeks. So I think right now the most important thing we can do is fight this platform language and try to bring more moderation to it. So does that mean like signing a petition? Does that mean contacting your local like Democratic Party leaders in your state? Yes. So, and also, I mean, look up to see in your state if there's a local Democrats for Life chapter and get involved with them, because we are doing a petition from our state chapters to the DNC too. So that's coming soon. So just be on the lookout for that and sign on to that platform, because we need as many voices as possible. If you are a religious leader right now, we have an open letter from religious leaders going to the DNC to say, that this is important from a religious perspective, that the party protect the most vulnerable. So we're getting a lot of different faiths to sign on to that letter. So if you're your priest or your minister, encourage them to sign on to this letter that Democrats for Life is doing, the open letter to from the religious leaders. Yeah, and I think it's important to, if you've got friends or family member, if you're not a Democrat, but you know somebody in your life who is a Democrat, and you talk to them about Democrats for Life, the very fact that Democrats for Life exists, I think when you think about evangelization, it's belong, believe, behave, right? And that's our model on campuses. Online, it's believe, belong, behave. We had to kind of change that model, but you've really got to show people that they do have a place to belong to. And I think it's just significant just to simply say that Democrats for Life exists. Because a lot of people go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's why, when you hear the word, feminists for life or other groups, special interest groups, people are like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this segment of folks, could be pro-life. And so I think that's really what we need to get across, is that this movement is a diverse movement, and we actually don't agree on like every tactic or every strategy, but we all agree that the intentional killing of this innocent human child is wrong. And so we need to find people where they're at. And if they're Democrat, they're Republican, if they're feminist, whatever they call themselves, and we need to get into that fold. So I think it's important to just make sure people know you exist. So one other thing people can do is, we've had our members doing this from now on, is if the DNC sends a lot of emails asking for money, and we encourage people to write back and say, no, I'm not going to give money to you until you alter the platform. And instead, I'm going to give money to Democrats for Life, or I'm going to give money to ex-Democratic pro-life candidate. So that's been a good tactic too, to just let the party know that, we're not going to support a party that doesn't support us or doesn't want our vote. So I encourage when people send me emails and tell me that they did that. Yeah, no, that's great. I actually had a supporter yesterday who emailed me and told me he's not paying his taxes because we fund Planned Parenthood. And I was like, oh, okay, sir. that's a little hard to do a protest of not paying your taxes, but
Yes.
not donating to a party. That's a good protest action. I think the other thing you can do is get involved with, Democrats for Life. They are, they get involved in some of these primary races. You can sign up to vote, to do our Vote Pro-Life First campaign at Students for Life Action. It's voteprolifefirst.com. And we have a call squad, or door squad. And like I said, right now we're doing primaries and making sure we punish pro-abortion Republicans and reward pro-life Democrats. And so get involved, and you don't have to be like a tried and true Republican pro-lifer, that's like always done the Republican Party, to go door to door and talk about why somebody should vote pro-life. All you have to do is, be with us against abortion. It doesn't really matter what your label is. And to be honest with you, I think, majority of the students we even work with at Students for Life who go out and do door knocking, phone banking, they're not Republicans. They're there and they're engaging in this action because they realize, while it's not a political issue, if politics is a way is one of our battlefields, and it's a way we engage as pro-lifers, because passing a law allowing abortions at all 9 months, or saying taxpayers are going to fund abortion, we know, because an early episode in this season from Dr. New, we know that's going to dramatically increase abortion levels. And so while our broader job is to transform the culture and everyone's thinking on abortion, we also have to fight against these laws, and we have to make sure we elect leaders who are going to confirm judges who are going to uphold pro-life laws, and not become judicial activists and make up, the thing called Roe versus Wade out of thin air. And so that's why politics matters. And, I'm not asking you to like politics. I'm not even asking you to like the candidates that you have to vote for. You don't have to ever go out for a beer with them or hang out with them. But I do ask you, and I ask everyone I talk to pledge to be a pro-life first voter, to say, this is the issue that matters to me. And if you have a pro-life Dem and a pro-life Republican, then you can go through the other issues that you care about and that you're called to care about. So any last thoughts, things I didn't ask you, Kristen, that you want folks to know about the Democratic Party, where it's going, and how we as pro-lifers can hopefully infiltrate and make both our parties stellar pro-life parties?
Right. I just think we need to get our voices out there. We need to speak up more. We need to be out there. And we added Teresa from ProLife San Francisco to our board.
Oh, that's great.
And she is just one of the best people she always has her microphone. She's we traveled around the country going to the Dem debates, and outside the Dem debates, saying pro-life for the whole life. And that visibility is critical, and particularly the students are just so essential to this effort, because they're just great activists, and they're just really dedicated and out there, and they're the future of this country, and we need these voices, particularly within the Democratic Party, to really push back and say that this is not where we stand, and if you want our vote, you have to fight for it. You can't continue down this abortion extremism path if the party's going to survive. So
that's right. I mean, there was just an article in the New York Times in May, and I started cheering when it came in, and they didn't interview me or anyone at Students for Life. There was a picture of our students in front of the Supreme Court holding pro-life gen signs, and the article title was something like young Republicans. Basically, the title is young Republicans don't like Trump, but abortion keeps getting them to vote for the party. And that was the whole premise of the article, is that, these younger conservative kids don't actually agree with the GOP on a lot of issues, but abortion is what keeps them voting Republican. And it's essentially, and we see it all the time. Yeah. Young people don't like Trump, but then they definitely can't vote for Joe Biden, or they can't vote for whoever, they'll tell me, based on, abortion, or sometimes, it'll be another issue that we will have this discussion about. And that's why I'm always like, you've got to kind of separate who you like and versus what you're trying to strategically to achieve. And I'm so glad Teresa is on your board. Teresa, I interviewed her, I think, it's about almost a year ago. You can look it up in the past podcast about being a pro-life atheist.
Yes.
I think the title of the podcast was pro-life atheist and vegan or something like that. And people, really interested in hearing her perspective. So I'm glad she's on board. And then I'm going to end with one question I have for you. And it's more of a personal question.
Okay.
Because I think that when we look at being pro-life, there's often that, you're going to face difficulty, right? If you're a pro-life student, if you stood up, anytime you stand up and declare yourself pro-life and that you're going to, abolish abortion, you're going to come under fire. I just want to know from you, like I said earlier, when I think of someone who can like walk into a room and like be okay with everybody in that room disagreeing with her at some point, I think of you, because and I've been in those rooms where everyone is very angry at you. So how do you keep moving forward with that? And what kind of grounds you to know, like, and doesn't burn you out?
Well, I know what I'm doing is the right thing to do. And we have to be successful. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the future and protecting these babies and helping these moms. And so I just keep moving forward. And and sometimes when I do get discouraged, I get emails or phone calls or people thanking me every day, for speaking up for them. Particularly after I asked the question to Pete Buttigieg in Iowa. In Des Moines, Iowa, when
I forgot about that. You were on like national news for like 3 days straight.
Yeah. Yes. And it was amazing because in that moment, it was a very sincere question. And I didn't think about who was around me or that everybody in the world knew that I was 50 years old because it had it on the screen. It was in that moment. And it was a sincere question that he just totally blew. It was just very disappointing. But I also think, I have 3 kids and a husband and a very loving family. So coming home to them every day, I know that, I know where I stand with them. And that's, the most important thing is my family, who was just wonderful, especially my senior in high school, who will be going off to college next year. So I just cherish these moments with them.
That's right. No, I think that's so right on, because I think it's probably one of the most common questions I get a lot is how do you handle people saying those things to you, either online or, in person,
Yeah.
How do you handle the burnout? And I kind of have the same answer. It's like, I know what my mission is. I just keep going forward. And, I ultimately, if my relationship is right with God and my relationship's right with my family, I really don't care what you think about me. Like, I don't get my validation. And I try to encourage that with students that we work with. You don't get your validation from other people's opinions of you. And if you do get your validation from another person's opinion of you, you are going to definitely run into problems at some point.
Right.
You've got to get validation from knowing that you're going in the right direction, how you're treating your family, how you're treating your loved ones, what your relationship with God is. Like, it's not coming from other people, because at some point, and it doesn't matter, even if you're not like an outed pro-life leader yet, even if you're just a Christian, people are going to hate you simply because of your beliefs. And so you have to be okay with that. And I don't know, I wish I had like a more, I don't know, scholarly answer to it besides just like keep moving forward. And as long as you know you're doing the right thing, you're okay.
Yeah.
But I do know it's a question I get asked a lot. So thank you for taking the time to answer it.
Yeah, thank you.
And giving me that personal perspective. And thanks for coming on and talking about your work at Democrats for Life and what you're trying to do with the party platform there. And I'm hopeful that folks will kind of go to Amazon. You wrote a book several years ago.
Yes.
And it kind of goes through the history of the Democratic Party and kind of how that metamorphosed into this now pro-abortion machine. And so I'm a history person, so I find it very interesting. I think a lot of times it comes down to money. You can see how
it's money. Yeah.
The money started flowing. We did a tour in 2016 on campuses called Cycle of Corruption. And it was like, look, the Republicans get money from these people, the Democrats get money from these people, and guess what? The more money that Planned Parenthood gets from taxpayers, the more money they give in political campaigns, the bigger their 501c3 and their PAC. And so it's like this endless cycle that just keeps continuing. And so a lot of it's just follow the money.
Right.
And so I think that's an important point, and it's definitely a point that helped me win over a lot of Democrats in 2016. So thanks for joining today, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure you check out Democrats for Life. You follow what they're doing on social media. You get involved in your party politics. I know I was 15 when I got involved in my Republican Party politics. And I was the youngest person there by 50 years. But it's important. These things matter. And we've got to make both parties, both the Republican and the Democratic parties, pro-life, because that's when we know truly we will have won, when they're both fighting for our votes in Washington, D.C., because we all know it's always about. It's about getting more votes and getting reelected. So thank you for tuning in, and make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you share this season, especially with new friends who are pro-life and maybe some of your pro-choice family members that just need a little bit of a nudge. Bye. Wow.